Welcome to another lecture in Fundamentals of Accounting. So this time we will discuss the accounting cycle, specifically from step 1 to step 4. So our learning objectives for this lecture is first to analyze the sequential steps in preparing journal entries. The second one is to posting the entries to the ledger. And the third is prepare trial balance. So, of course, we all know that the accounting, it has a cycle. Okay? So, it has steps. No? Within a particular period or within a certain period, one accounting cycle will be completed. So, of course, let's head on to step 1, the identification of events to be recorded. So, for step 1, you have this what we call transaction analysis, because we all know that not every transaction that may have transpired during that period shall be recorded. Okay, so only those transactions that should be recorded will have to be recorded, okay, in the books of the in the accounting books of the business. That's why we need transaction analysis. So the transactions are analyzed in 4 basic steps. First, identify the transactions from the source documents. So if a transaction is recordable, then you have to check the source documents to prove that the said transaction is evidence. Yan. And then indicate the accounts from the elements that are affected by the transaction. Okay, so you have to note or record as to what account is being affected by that transaction, and then ascertain whether each account is decreased or increased by the transaction. So here comes the debit and credit. Okay, in this one you have to master the normal balances of the account. And then using the debit and credit rule, determine whether the account are to be credited or to be debited to record for each increase or decrease. Ayan. So technically in this step, you really need to analyze whether a transaction has an economic effect into the business, and such effect is financial in character. Okay? Because there are transactions that may have transpired but is not but do not have the economic consequence to the financial resources of the entity. Ayan. So, since we discussed or we mentioned about source document, that's in number 1, okay, identification of the transaction from the source documents. What is a source document? So source document will tell if the events will affect the performance or position of the organization. So when you say performance, that's the income statement. While position naman, that's the balance sheet. If it affects ba this the performance or the position of the business. So this also considered as the starting point of the accounting cycle, because this is the written original evidence to support the nature and amount of the transactions and basis for journal entries. So of course, you cannot just, prepare journal entry, record uh, an activity that affects a certain account without any evidence to it. So dapat meron tayong evidence to prove that that transaction really exists. Okay? Now, some of the common source documents are the following. So we have official receipts. Yan. So when you go to the stores, when you purchase materials or goods, okay, you will receive, of course, official receipts, right? You have charged invoice. Ayan. So if you purchased on account, sales invoice, no, if there is a sales on account, bank deposit slip kapag nag-deposit ng cash on hand to the bank, and then cash register tapes, the checks, bank statements, purchase orders, receiving reports, time cards for employees, ayan, time tickets for employees pa din for in the determination of their salaries. And then statement of accounts, okay, specimens and others. So technically, there are a lot of source documents that can be used as evidence to for a transaction or before a transaction will be recorded into the books or into the records of the into the accounting records of the organization. So this is all the steps in which the transactions are recordable or not recordable, as this step is the decision on recognition or non-recognition of the transaction. So technically, kapag wala tayong source document, huwag nating i-record yung transaction na yun. Kasi we need proof, no? We need proof of the existence of the said transaction, that it really did exist and that it affects the accounts of the entity. Yan. Okay, for step 2 naman, transactions are recorded in the journals. Ito na yung gumagawa tayo ng journal entry. So it aims to record the analyzed transactions on the journal. And then for step 3, it aims to, the journal entries are posted to the ledgers. Ito na yung posting, okay, to the ledger. Summarizing. Ayan, it aims to transfer the journalized transactions in the journals to the ledger. So technically, ang step 2, ito yung recording. Okay? Step 1, ito yung identification or identifying. Step 2, recording to the journal. Step 3, summarizing to the ledger, no, or posting, okay, the entries in the journal to the ledger. Ayan. And then for step 4, we have preparation of a trial balance. So it aims naman to provide a listing of accounts with balances to verify the equality of debit and credit in the ledger. For step 5 naman, we have preparation of worksheet, including adjusting entries. So this is the preparation of the information to aid in the preparation of the financial statements. Ayan. So ito namang worksheet, this is the step wherein from the trial balance that you will prepare in step 4, okay, dito mo i-insert yung mga yung mga adjustments. Okay, kasi unadjusted trial balance man yung ma-prepare natin dito. So at the end of the year, we need to adjust these accounts. Okay? And then for step 6 naman, that's preparation of the financial statement. Of course, after natin ma-plot sa worksheet and ma-incorporate yung adjusting entries sa mga unadjusted balances, you can now prepare your financial statement. So this is to provide necessary information to the decision makers. For step 7 naman, we have adjusting journal entries are journalized and posted. So this is to record the accruals, expirations of deferrals, estimations, and other events from the worksheet. Yeah. And then we have step 8 here, the closing journal entries are journalized and posted. So this is to close all the temporary and transfer the profit to the owner's equity. So yung sinasabi niya dito na temporary, ito actually yung mga nominal or temporary or nominal accounts. So technically, yung mga accounts na makikita natin sa income statement. Okay? The income and the expense accounts. For step 9 naman, that's preparation of a post-closing trial balance. So of course, after natin ma-close yung mga temporary or nominal accounts, the net effect, the income or the loss will now be added or deducted to the capital account in the owner's equity section of the balance sheet. So technically, the result or the financial performance or the result of the operation during a period will now reflect in the balance sheet. Yan. Kaya meron tayong post-closing trial balance. So sa post-closing trial balance, ang makikita natin doon would be the statement of financial position or balance sheet accounts na lang. Ayan. So the asset, liabilities, and the adjusted owner's equity. And for step 10 naman, that's reversing journal entries are journalized and posted. So this is to simplify the recognition of certain regular transactions in the next accounting period for smooth and easy process. Ayan. So, in the first day after the end of the accounting period, we will do reversing entries. Ayan. So, nire-reverse natin yung mga adjusting entries na ginawa natin at the end of the year. That's only, no, the purpose of which is to facilitate smooth and easy process in the next accounting period for some accounts. Okay. So, if you take a look at here, you have the complete accounting process or accounting cycle. Okay? So we have 10, no? Technically, we have 10. Now, let's start with the journal. So this is step 2. So, the journal. So, ano ba yung journal? So, journal is the book of original entry. Oh, remember, this is the book of original entry. And it shows the effect of the transaction in terms of debits and credits and record the transactions in a chronological order. So, when you say chronological order, yung mga transactions that happened earlier will be posted earlier. Okay? Now, journalizing is the process of recognizing or recording transactions to the journal in terms of debit and credit effect of the account. So, sa journalizing, magdi-debit at magki-credit tayo. Each account will be debited or credited depending on the effect of the transaction to that account. So, the journal entries are referred to the format no in recording transactions in journal. So we have general journal is the simplest form of journal kasi meron din tayong tinatawag na mga special journal. So there are two types of journal entries. Okay? So ano ba yung mga dalawang klase ng journal entries? We have the simple journal entries. It composed of one debit and one credit account. When the compound journal entries naman are composed of multiple debit or credit accounts. Now, after the preparation of a journal entry is the posting of the entries in the journal to the ledger. So you have here the journal and the ledger. So posting is the process of transferring the amounts from the general journal to the appropriate account in the ledger. So of course, after natin ma-journal or kapag tapos na tayo mag-journalize sa lahat ng mga transactions, ipopost natin siya sa ledger. So ito na yung summarizing na portion. No? So the ledger is the grouping of accounts and used to classify and summarize. So ito na yung classification and summarizing na portion. No? The transactions and to prepare data for basic financial statements. Now, then after posting all the transactions to the ledger, the debit side and the credit side are summed up, and then the balance of the account, then you get the balance of the account. Okay? So, every account in the journal, meron yan silang ledger. So, isa-isa merong ledger. So, lahat ng mga transactions that affect that certain account sa journal, na journalize, pag pinost na yan sa ledger, kumbaga, it will be classified and summarized to that certain account's ledger. Okay? So, later, we will discuss posting to the ledger. Now, the journal, the ledger, and the trial balance. So, the balance of each account is transferred to the trial balance. Okay? So, di ba, in the ledger, after natin ma-post lahat ng transactions to the ledger, we get, we sum it up and we get the balance, either debit or credit. So, the debit or the credit balance of that account na nasa ledger will be forwarded to the trial balance, no, for the verification of the amount of the account balances of the debit and credit are equal. So, in a trial balance, we will know if the debit and credit ba is equal. Okay? Now, this is also the listing of all ledger accounts in ordeal or in order. So, with the respecting debit or respective debit or credit balances. Of course, again, after natin masum up siya dito, we get the debit or the credit balance. ipopost or ita-transfer natin sa trial balance with two reasons. Una is to verify whether the debit and the debit equals the credit, and uh, this is also where we list all the ledger accounts in order, okay, from asset to equity to income and to expenses, and to determine again whether the debit side is equal to the credit side. Yan. Now, let's get back to the journal. So what are the contents of a journal ba? So the standard contents in the format of the general journal are as follows. Siyempre, hindi dapat kalimutan yung date, the account titles and explanation, the PR or posting reference, the debit and the credit. So, meron tayong section for each of these items. Example, the simple journal entry. So, we have here in El Nocencio Dado formed a business named Lamyon Ramen Restaurant on January 1, 2020. He posted 300 or deposited 390,000 amount to Moy Money Bank in the name of the business. Okay? So, we have here the date section, the account title and explanation, the posting reference, the debit, and the credit. So, isa-isa may section, no? So, lagay natin dito, that's 2020. So, in the first blank here, or in the first box, we put 2020 as the year. Okay? And after which, ilagay natin yung month, the date, no? That's January 1. So, lagay natin Jan 1. Ayan. So, after the date, the account title and explanation na. Okay? So, ano ba yung affected? So, let's see ourselves, when you prepare journal entry, you see yourself as if you are the business. Okay? Now, if you see yourself as if you are the business of Nel Nocencio Disadado, pag-deposit ni Nel Nocencio Disadado ng 390,000, ikaw yung naka-receive ng, or si business yung naka-receive ng 390,000 as the capital, no? Initial capital of the owner, the Disadado. So, syempre, naka-receive ka ng cash. So, lalaki yung cash mo because of the deposit for the initial capital of the owner. So, lalaki yung cash ng business. And then, the corresponding credit is the credit to Disadado capital. Ayan. That's, again, lagyan natin ng initial investment. Okay? So, remember that cash is an asset. Dahil naka-receive ka ng cash, lumaki yung cash mo, so i-debit mo si cash because the normal balance of an asset is debit. And dahil lumaki yung capital ni Disadado due to his investment, so lalaki din yung we credit capital. That's Disadado capital because, again, capital or equity has a normal credit balance. So kung lalaki siya, i-credit mo siya. Ayan. And then you post the amount, that's 390,000 to debit and to the credit. So you make it sure that dapat equal yung debit and credit. Now, the compound journal entry example. Acquired a service vehicle for 195,000 on account and furniture of 75,000 for cash on January 2, 2020. So it's now on January 2, gawa natin ng compound journal entries. So technically, this transaction involves two or more accounts na i-debit at saka i-credit. Okay? So, nag-acquire siya ng service vehicle. Kaya, service vehicle is an asset, di ba? Service vehicle is an asset. So, dahil naka-receive siya ng service vehicle by acquiring it for 195, so magdi-debit siya ng service vehicle. Okay? For 195,000. Pero sabi dito that the 195,000 is on account, meaning hindi niya binayaran for cash. So, because of this, lalaki yung accounts payable niya. May obligation siya to pay the 195,000 because it is a payment for the service vehicle acquired on account. So, inutang niya. So, lalaki yung payable niya. O, accounts payable is a liability. And liability has a normal credit balance. So, if we wish to increase a liability, we credit the liability account. That's a credit to accounts payable for 195,000. Now, Another asset has been purchased, no, the furniture, for 75,000 cash. So, naka-receive siya ng furniture and fixtures. Kasi, bumili siya ng furniture and fixture. Okay? So, debit, asset, 75,000. Dahil binayaran niya for cash, lumiit yung cash niya. Lumiit yung cash niya kasi nga, ginamit niya to pay the purchased furniture. So, that's credit cash for 75,000. Okay? Now, for the first transaction, acquisition of service vehicle, alam natin that this is a source of asset because an asset account increases while a liability account decreases. While for the second transaction, the purchase of furniture, that's exchange of asset because while another asset account or when an asset account increases, another asset account decreases. So there is an exchange in asset transaction here. Ayan. So that's the compound journal entry. There are more than one debits and more than one credit. And of course, do not forget the explanation. Purchase of vehicle and furniture. Okay, so we have your illustration. Ayan, so we technically have 12 transactions here, no? So this is Nilosencio Degantina, no? Formed Dagantino pala. Formed a business named Lamyon Ramen Restaurant on January 2020. During the month of January, the following transactions occurred. So we have transactions here from the different dates, no, of the month. Ayan, that's 12 transactions. And then, it says that prepare journal entries using the following accounts. So it is important na pag nag-prepare tayo ng journal entry, the accounts that we should use is the provided chart of accounts. So meron kasi, hindi kasi tayo pwede gagawa ng kahit anong chart of accounts na lang. So ipoprovide yan. Chart of accounts. Ayan. So ito daw yung mga affected na accounts at ito daw yung account titles na gamitin natin for these transactions. Okay? Ayan. Okay, transactions for January 1. He deposited 470,000. Okay, to Moy Money Bank. So technically, again, meron tayong section for the date, for the account titles and explanation, for posting reference, the debit, and the credit. Okay? So on January 1, ayan, there is a deposit for initial investment. So technically, that's a debit to cash and a credit to Dagantino Capital. Ayan. For 70,000 and initial investment. For the second transaction, that's acquired a service vehicle for 195,000 on account and furniture of 60,000 for cash. So bumili ng service vehicle na 195,000 on account, so inutang niya, so debit service vehicle, credit accounts payable. Again, this is source of asset to SA. 195,000 kasi inutang niya. Ayan. Pero bumili siya ng furniture din, kaya lang for cash. So, debit furniture and fixture asset, increase in asset. And credit cash, decrease in asset kasi nagbayad siya for cash. Exchange in asset na transaction ito. Do not forget the explanation, purchase service vehicle and furniture. Ayan. And it is also important to note na for the second day, or for the second transaction of the month, hindi na tayo maglalagay ng January. Maglalagay lang tayo ng January if it's in the first transaction for that month. So technically, the first transaction happened on January 1. So sa that transaction lang din tayo maglagay ng Jan. Okay? For the second transaction, hindi na tayo maglalagay ng Jan kasi magiging redundant na siya. It only means na the second transaction still happened in January, for the month of January. Ayan. Tapos, after the first transaction, wag nating ilagay automatic sa row or sa column, no, na after the explanation. So dapat meron tayong space muna diyan, no? isang space, and then lagay mo na doon after which doon na natin ilalagay yung second transaction. Same happens again after every transaction, dapat hindi dikit-dikit. Dapat may space before the next transaction. Okay? Now, for January 3, acquired office supplies for cash, 65,000. So, bumili ng office supplies for cash, 65,000. So, naka-receive siya ng office supplies, debit kasi asset, credit cash kasi binayaran niya for cash. This transaction is an exchange of asset, no? Amounting to 65,000. Ayan. Again, dapat debits equal credits. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the next transactions. On January 9, received 95,000 cash for ramyun orders. So, may nag-order for cash. Okay? So, dahil naka-receive siya ng cash, as you can see, yung date natin is 9, hindi tayo naglagay ng January. Kasi again, all of these transactions happen on January. So, naka-receive siya ng cash, kaya debit cash. Naka-receive ng service income. Ayan. So, syempre, yung cash na receive niya is payment for orders of ramyun. Okay? So, syempre, yung orders na yon, that is income kasi that's sales, no? And based on the account titles dito, okay, balikan lang natin. Yung gamitin daw natin is service income for sales, no? Ayan. So, service income din yung ginamit natin dito. Receive cash for customers as explanation. And then, dahil walang PR or posting reference, so just leave it blank, no? And then, you debit 95,000 cash and credit for 95,000 as service income. Ayan. Lagay na naman tayo ng space before the next transaction in January 10, stating that paid the month rental of 30,000. So, rental is, kumbaga, nagrental lang siya ng space. So, that is an expense. No? So, expense has a normal debit balance. Dahil nagbayad siya, it means lumaki yung expense niya. So, dahil palakihin natin yung expense, i-debit natin sa expense because that's the normal balance of expense. Dahil binayaran niya for cash o credit cash, lumiit yung cash niya kasi ginamit niya yung cash niya to pay the rental or the rent. And that is use of asset. 30,000. Do not forget the explanation, paid rental expense. For on January 11, deliver the catering order to Omyon Company amounted to 199,000 and receive payment of 29,000 and the remaining is on account. So this is a transaction that includes the journal entry will include a multiple debits or multiple credits. So, let's analyze. So, nag-deliver daw siya ng catering order to Omyon Company. So, that's a catering order, meaning that's income kasi mayroon siyang service na pin-provide. Catering to Omyon Company. That's 199,000. So, technically, the 199,000 is service income. So, dahil income is or has a normal credit balance and lalaki yung service income natin due to this transaction, credit natin si service income for 199,000. Yan, credit. Now, sa 199,000, yung binayaran daw is 29,000 lang and the rest is on account. So, yung 29,000, that's for cash kasi receive payment of 29,000. So, that's lumaki yung cash in this case. So, debit cash for 29,000 and the remaining is on account. So, technically, dahil yung binenta mo or yung service na pin-provide mo is 199,000, yung binayad nila is 29,000 lang cash, kaya meron ka pang collectible sa customer for the remaining balance. No? That's 199,000 minus 29,000. So, meron pang 170,000 ka na collectible. So, that's an asset pa rin kasi you will collect that one in the future. Okay, so that's the right to collect in the future. And that right is an asset debited to accounts receivable. Kaya debit tayo ng accounts receivable. Debit cash for the cash received as payment, and debit accounts receivable for the collectible amount or remaining amount that will be collected in the future. Both are asset accounts, debit. Okay? So do not forget the explanation, render catering services. Now, next transactions on January 12, paid the 50% of the account on January 2. Okay? Or January 2 transactions. Ano ba yung transaction in January 2? Ayan, for the purchased service vehicle. No, nag-purchase siya ng service vehicle, 195,000, but on account, so may accounts payable sa 195,000. Binayaran daw niya ang 50% ng 195,000. So 50% of 195,000 is 97,500. So dahil binayaran natin siya, liliit yung cash natin. So we credit cash, 97,500. O dahil binayaran na natin yung utang natin, liliit na din yung utang ng business. Kaya, i-debit natin si accounts payable. Remember that accounts payable is a liability that has a normal credit balance. Dahil lumiit siya or nag-decrease siya kasi binayaran na natin siya, we debit accounts payable for the same amount, 97,500. Payment of accounts. Now, for number 19 or January 19 transaction, collected 100,000 from Union Co account. So, remember na meron siyang receivable from Union na 170,000. Nag-collect na daw siya ng 100,000. So, yung mangyayari is, naka-receive siya ng 100,000 for the collection of the account or of the receivable and credit accounts receivable. So, paliitin na natin si accounts receivable kasi na-collecta na natin siya. Okay, 100,000. Na-convert na siya into cash by collecting the account. For January 24, withdraw 27,000 cash for personal use. So dahil kumuha ng cash yung owner from the business, liliit yung cash ng business. So we credit cash 27,000. Ano naman yung corresponding debit? The withdrawal kasi nag-withdraw yung owner. So that's the Gantino withdrawals. Okay? 27,000. Explanation, withdrawal for personal use. Etong withdrawal or drawing account that has a normal debit balance. Kumbaga, that's a contra capital account. Okay? So, may normal debit balance siya. Lalaki siya kasi nga nag-withdraw man yung owner. So, we debit the Gantino withdrawal. And on January 28, pay the salaries for the month of 66,000. So, nagbayad siya ng expense, ng salaries expense. So, liliit yung cash niya kasi nagbayad siya for cash. A credit to cash. Okay, 66,000. And that's a debit to salaries expense. Remember, expense has a normal debit balance. So, kasi may na-incur siya na expense during the month, so that's gonna be debit to salaries expense. 66,000. Payment of salaries. On January 30, paid utilities in the amount of 29,600. Another expense. So you debit utilities expense, credit cash for 29,600 for the payment of utilities. And for January 31, receive bill from Adver company, 36,500 for advertising. So naka-receive siya ng bill. Meaning, may expense siya. Pero hindi pa niya nabayaran. Unlike dito, of course, etong salaries, expense ito, binayaran. Ang utilities, may billing siya, expense siya, pero binayaran. Dito naman, another billing for an expense, that's advertising expense, pero hindi nabayaran. Okay? Again, for transaction on January 28, expense, pero binayaran. On January 30, expense pa rin or expenses, binayaran. Pagka January 31, another expense or billing for an expense, pero hindi binayaran. Okay? So, naka-incur siya ng expense, pero hindi pa niya binayaran. So, may utang pa siya ng 36,500. Okay? So, that's gonna be a debit to advertising expenses and a credit to accrued expense. Okay? So, if you compare this transaction to the preceding two transactions, nag-record tayo ng expense, that's debit advertising expense. Kasi nga, again, naka-incur tayo ng advertising expense. Lumaki yung expense natin sa advertising. Kaya dinebit natin siya. Pero hindi pa siya binayaran for this month or this month sa January. Okay, kaya dahil hindi pa siya binayaran, the credit is not cash, but a liability account, which is accordingly accrued expense. No? Accrued expenses yung corresponding credit for 36,500. Explanation, receipt of a bill from advertising. Again, hindi siya binayaran, kaya liability siya. Payable siya in the future. Okay, credit, a liability account, accrued expense. Yeah. So that's the journalizing, that's the step 2 no, journalizing of transaction or preparing journal entries. Okay? Now, tapos na tayo mag-journal. Now, let's proceed to step 3, the ledger. Diba sabi natin, journalizing is the recording, identifying and recording of events or business activities. Pagka step 3, after natin mag-journal, yung mga entries na nasa journal, ilipat or i-post natin sa ledger. Ito naman yung classifying and summarizing sa ledger. Step 3, no? So, the ledger. This is the grouping of all entities accounts. So, lahat ng accounts doon na nasa journal entries, i-group natin siya. Lahat ng naka-apekto sa cash or entry sa cash, ilagay natin siya sa cash ledger. Lahat ng entries on accounts receivable, ilagay natin siya sa account receivable ledger. So, the reference book or the ledger is the reference book of the accounting system and is used to classify and summarize effects of transactions and to prepare data for basic financial statements. So, posting naman is the transferring of the amount in the journal to the specific accounts of the company. So, from the journal, iba-ibang entries doon, ilipat natin siya. The process is called posting. Ilipat natin siya to specific accounts. So, sa cash ledger, sa accounts receivable ledger, sa uh, service income ledger. Okay? So, the debit in the journal entries shall be debited to the T accounts or the ledger of that particular account, and the same with the credit journal entries. So, every account, meron yang ledger. Okay, we have different forms of a ledger. We have T account na ledger. We also have the ang ledger kasi parang T account kasi yan lahat eh. Now, for this discussion or for this lecture, we will use the T account form of the ledger. But all other ledger, para yung T account pa rin. Okay? Yan. So again, every account, meron yan silang own ledger account. Now, each account has its own ledger. Oh, that's what I have said, no? And this organizes the transactions per account. So makikita natin sa ledger ng account na yan, particular account na yan, yung mga debits and credits, okay, relating to that accounts. So there are two general groups of general ledger. We have permanent or real accounts. So ito naman yung mga balance sheet accounts, no? The financial position accounts. So ano naman yon? That's asset, liabilities, and owner's equity. Ito yung mga accounts na tinatawag na permanent or real account. Temporary or nominal accounts naman or income statement accounts or comprehensive income accounts. Ang mga accounts naman na ito ay income and expenses. So temporary or nominal accounts siya because at the end of the year, kino-close siya. There is closing entries for these accounts. Okay? Ayan. So at the end of the period, the balances of these accounts are transferred to permanent owner's equity accounts. So these are used to accumulate and gather all the information for a particular accounting period. And the balance of each account is determined by footing. When you say footing, i-add mo lahat ang debit, i-add mo lahat ang credit, or adding all the debits and credits. If the sum of debits are higher, than the sum of the credit, then the account has debit balance. Okay? Pag mas malaki yung total debit kaysa sa total credit, it means that that account has a debit balance. And if the sum of the debits naman is lesser than the sum of the credit, meaning pag mas malaki yung sum ng credit kaysa sa sum ng debit, then the account has credit balance. Okay? So, apply natin to later. So, the steps in posting are as follows. Number 1, transfer the date of the transaction or transfer the date of the transaction. Transfer the page number of the journal to the journal reference. No? Transfer the debit journal figure to the debit ledger figure and the credit journal figure to the credit ledger figure. Kung naka-debit siya sa journal, debit din siya pagdating sa ledger. Kung yung account naka-credit sa journal, i-credit mo din yung amount sa account na yun sa ledger. And then enter the amount number in the account number in the posting reference column to the account number of the account in the ledger. So, kada account, meron niyang number. Account number. For example, cash. Yung account number niya is 001. Sa journal, naka 001 siya. Sa ledger, dapat lagyan mo din siya ng number 001. Cash. Kung accounts receivable, ang account number niya is 002, dapat sa ledger meron din siyang 002. Ayan. For example, sample key accounts for transactions of the illustration, no? Yung kay Desadado. So, 'di ba? Sa cash, meron siyang ito yung ledger ng cash. Okay? Ginawa natin siyang T account yung ledger niya or naka T account form. Sa left debit, sa right credit, always 'yan. So, yung cash doon, 'di ba, nag-increase ng 390,000 due to the initial investment. O, ilagay din natin siya sa debit kasi naka-debit siya sa journal. Ito naman, dahil naka-credit sa journal, credit din natin siya sa ledger. Okay? Of course, yung mga entries natin kanina sa journal, ilipat natin siya sa ledger. So, the chart of accounts. Before that, punta muna tayo sa chart of accounts. So, this is the listing of all accounts and their account number in the ledger. So, lahat ng accounts na gamitin in journal entries and in the ledger, ito yung tinatawag dyan ay chart of accounts or tawag dyan chart of accounts. So these are arranged no in the financial statement order that follows the order as follows. No, you have asset muna. So sa chart of accounts dapat nakalist una yung asset accounts, and then yung liabilities account, and then yung owner's equity accounts, and then yung income accounts, and then yung expense accounts. So the accounts should be numbered in flexible manner to permit indexing and cross-referencing. Dapat naka-number siya para kapag inaudit na natin siya or we are cross-referencing or we are indexing, madali lang natin siyang matrace. So this is also used for referencing, no? So the correct account titles used in the journal entries, and if the account title is not listed in the chart of an additional account may be added. Ayan. So, of course, kapag may mga transaction naman na yung account, yung affected account ay wala nakalist sa chart of accounts, so pwede naman natin siya i-add. Okay? Now, let's do the ledger. So, the same information of illustration number 1, yung entries, ginawa natin ng journal entries kanina, post the transactions in the ledger using the T account format of presenting the ledger. Balikan na lang muna natin yung mga transactions. So we have here transactions, no? Ito mga transactions na to. Each account title or ito yung chart of accounts. Each account title meron yung ledger. Okay, si cash, accounts receivable, and so on. Okay? So ito na yung mga transactions kanina na ginawa natin na journal entry. Ilipat lang natin siya sa particular ledger account. For example, si cash, meron siyang ledger. For January 1, dinebit natin si cash. So, yung amount ni cash na dinebit natin sa January 1, ilagay din natin siya sa debit side ni cash. Okay? Sa pagka-entry number 2 or on January 2, kinredit natin si cash. So, itong amount na to na kinredit natin, ilagay din natin sa credit side ni cash. On January 3, kinredit naman natin si cash. So maglagay na naman tayo ng amount sa credit side ng cash. Ayan. Okay? Kung baka transfer lang natin to summarize, to classify each transaction that affects that said account to that account's particular or to that account's own ledger. Okay? The same goes with other accounts here, no? Ito si service vehicle. So, dahil dinebit natin siya, i-debit din natin siya sa kanyang ledger, itong account na to. Now, tingnan natin yung ledger account. Ayan. Okay, meron na tayo ditong mga ledger accounts. Okay? So, we have here for cash. So, we listed all the transactions, all the amounts na dinebit natin si cash and kinredit natin si cash. Okay? Of course, nilagyan natin ng date para malaman natin kung kailan nangyari yan. Para pag cross-reference natin, pagtingin natin sa journal, nangyari yan o January 1 o. Sa journal, hanapin din natin si January 1 na entries to prove na there is really an entry to that in the journal. Okay? Pagka 9, ayan. Pagka January 11, ayan. So, lahat ng debit sa cash, nilagay natin sa debit. Lahat ng credit sa cash na nasa journal, nilagay natin sa credit. So, yung sinasabi na footing, i-add mo lang lahat. No? Add. And you get, the total of this one is 694,000. Tinotal din natin yung credit. The total is 375,100. Okay? Now, after natin siya na-foot, na nakuha na natin yung total debit at saka total credit, we get the higher amount. Okay, we determine, ano bang mas malaki, si debit, si credit? Si debit for cash. So, dahil mas malaki si debit kaysa sa credit, i-deduct natin, we get the difference. So, debit, 694,000 minus credit, 375,100. We get the balance na 318,900. So, meaning the cash has a debit balance. Kasi mas malaki si debit sa credit. The debit balance is the difference between the debit and the credit. Okay? So, the same goes with accounts receivable. No? So, lahat ng transactions na dinebit natin sa accounts receivable, ilagay natin pag-post natin sa ledger, ilipat natin yung, pinost natin yung accounts, yung amount for debits and the amounts affecting the accounts receivable for credit. And then we foot. So, we have 170,000 here, debit, 100,000 credit. So, mas malaki yung debit kaya accounts receivable has a debit balance at the end of the period for 70,000. Okay? The same goes with office supplies, service vehicle, furniture and fixture, accounts payable, accrued expenses, Dagantino capital and Dagantino withdrawal. Okay, so ito na yung mga ledger, ito na yung ledger of each account. Ito na yung real or ito na yung permanent or real account ledger. Okay? For this one naman, ito na yung mga ledger for temporary or nominal accounts. We have service income, we have rental expense, we have salaries expenses, we have utilities expense, and we have advertising expenses. Okay? Now, after natin ma-post sa ledger, from the journal to the ledger, we can now prepare trial balance. Okay? This is step 4, no? For trial balance, or should we say, unadjusted trial balance. Now, trial balance will list all accounts with the corresponding debit or credit balances from the ledger. Now, this is to verify the equality of debits and credit in the ledger at the end of each accounting period or at any time after posting are updated. So, di ba may mga debit or credit balances tayo dito? Itong debit or credit balances naman, ito na yung ilipat natin sa trial balance. For example, si cash, pag ilagay natin siya sa trial balance ang cash. So, cash, and then debit balance, 318,900. Accounts receivable, debit balance, 70,000. Dagantino capital, credit balance, 470,000. So, yung mga balances nila at the end of the, after natin sila ma-post sa ledger, ilagay natin sa trial balance. Again, to know whether the debit is equal to the credit. Okay? So steps, list all the account titles in numerical order. So based on their account number sa chart of accounts, yun din yung basis natin in preparing trial balance. Pag-list natin sa accounts. And then get the account balance of each account from the ledger and enter the debit balance or of the ledger to the debit column of the trial balance. Or if the account naman sa credit balance, so enter mo siya to the credit column of the trial balance. And then add the debit and the credit columns and then compare the total kung equal ba. Now, we have here the ledger, the trial balance. Okay, so the same yung ledgers na pinrepare natin kanina, gawa tayo ng trial balance. So we have here Lamyon Ramen Restaurant. Okay, Nelosencio Dagantino. Title natin, ano ba yung document na yan? Trial balance. Anong month? January 2020. So do not forget the headings. So we list the account titles. Itong listing of account titles natin, based lang din ito sa chart of account na pinresent natin kanina. Okay? So cash, accounts receivable, yan. So tapos, dito na side, we have debit column, we have credit column. Again, kung sa ledger, yung account naka-debit balance o yung debit balance, ilagay mo siya sa debit column sa trial balance. Kung account sa ledger, naka-credit balance, yung balance na yon ilagay din natin siya sa credit column of the trial balance, and so on. Now, after which, tinotal natin, isum natin lahat ng debit, and let's sum lahat ng credit. As you can see, the total debit is 898,000 and the total credit is 898,000. Okay? And for this, we can say that the debit is equal to the credit. The sum of the debit equals the sum of the credit. This means, or this only means na tama yung journal entries. For at least for the accounts. For the amounts. Meron kasing time na tama yung amount mo, debit and credit, pero mali yung account na ginamit mo, mali pa rin. Okay? Pero ang trial balance is isa siya sa basis na that will indicate na tama yung entries natin sa journal for the amount. That lahat ng debit sa journal is equal to the credit talaga. So, ito na yung sa trial balance. No? Summarized. Ayan, summarized. And again, we proved that the debit is equal to credit. Okay? So, that's the entries. That's the accounting cycle. Step 1 to step 4 muna tayo. Again, first, analysis of transaction. Step 2, preparation of the journal, no, or the journal entry. Step 3, posting to the ledger. And step 4, preparation of an adjusted trial balance. Ayan. And that's it. Thanks for watching. And let's look forward for more video lectures in fundamentals of accounting and other accounting subjects.